Hello, we're glad to have you join us. This is Platform. I'm Ruth Aguele. Crimes are part of every society. Now, these crimes in time past were committed by persons that have attained the age of adult. But in recent decades, there had been an alarming rate or rise in the number of child or juvenile delinquencies across the world, including Nigeria. This juvenile may have come to face to face with the law and are unfortunately often treated like adults and mixed with adults in prisons or correctional centers because of the nature of crime committed by this juvenile. Their actions naturally puts the parents or guardians in a disturbed mood because the future or dreams of these young ones may be thwarted. Now, some of these crimes associated with juveniles are in different categories. But you ask, is the punishment for a juvenile meant to be the same as an adult who committed a crime? Well, I'm not the legal professional here, but what does the law say? Now, let's paint a picture in the legal aspect. Under the juvenile justice system, it encompasses an exposition of the legal, social, and welfare of the child, both from the government and the citizens, for the interests of the child. The child justice system requires that in dealing with cases involving children, the reason for such action by the child should be the focus and not the offense committed. And treating the delinquency and setting measures to reintegrate the child into society instead of punishment should be the target. Now, coming from the arraignment of minors in the Nigerian court recently, we saw happen, which the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria had to intervene before the case was struck out. But of course, it sprang up a lot of narratives. What are the laws that protect children in a juvenile trial? Are the laws active in Nigeria? We'll get to find out shortly. On Platform, our focus is dealing with juvenile cases. And our guest is Echo Ejembi, Echo, S-A-N. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr.
Yeah,
Echo.
glad to be here. Pleasure is all mine.
Fantastic. You know, we have to let you in more on who our guest is appropriately by reading out his profile. We have a brief one here. Echo holds a Master's of Law degree, diploma in corporate and commercial law, and a postgraduate certificate in international business law from the University of London. And he is presently undertaking his doctorate degree program. Echo is a professionally trained chartered arbitrator. His practice interests include general legal practice, litigation, labor law, human rights law, family law, corporate law, private law, public interest law, and real estate law. As a consummate and versatile lawyer, Echo has a number of unpublished write-ups on contemporary legal issues. He's a member of different professional bodies, the Nigerian Bar Association, the International Bar Association, Nigerian Institute of Management, Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, Chartered Institute of Arbitration, United Kingdom, and many more achievements to his credit. Well done, Mr. Echo.
Thank you.
All right, our panelist is one of our judiciary correspondents here in NTA, Austin Ayinde. Austin, thank you for joining us on Platform. It's been a while.
Thank you for having me, Ruth.
Great. Mr. Echo, I don't know if we should start with the case we saw happen not too long. Okay, let's use that as a case study. You know, it brought a lot of narratives. People had their own opinion, but you're the legal practitioner here. It's not the first time we'll see minors commit an offense. But the question is the justice system for juvenile. What does the law say?
No, practically, if you're speaking to the criminal justice sector as it regards juveniles, you have to make reference to the Administration of Criminal Justice Act and the Child Rights Act.
Yes.
In summation, they cover all aspects of juvenile trials, from arraignment to bail to detention, especially the Child Rights Act. It's more all-encompassing. Even the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which is AJA for short, makes regards and reference and defers to the Child Rights Act. So for purposes of the criminal justice sector as it regards juveniles, Child Rights Act. should be your final bus
Okay,
stop.
so that's on a broader perspective, the Child Rights Act. But let's narrow it down to juvenile justice system in Nigeria. If you want to look at number of cases that has been tried for juvenile, would you say, as a legal practitioner, we're in the right trajectory?
No, the criminal justice sector with regards to juveniles in Nigeria has a lot to be desired. We have a lot of work to do. There is no painting it over here. What you just saw is just an instance. This is something that has been repetitive. Thank God this happened. Perhaps the executive and the lawmakers need to sit up and realize that we have a problem. And that problem is a socio-realistic one. It is not just one that you wish away by just lawmaking. It's not one you wish away by speaking to this particular issue, then moving on from it. There has to be an overhaul of the system. How many bus-style institutions do you have in Nigeria? How many states can even boast of a bus-style institution? How are these juveniles detained? How are they arraigned? The personnel, the infrastructure is nothing to speak of. If you follow the law, even the police, they are supposed to have a special section for children. That is not in existence. It's only on paper. We speak to the judiciary. How are these judges trained to handle children cases and juvenile-related cases? Is the training annually, biannually, frequently? How is it done? Should budgets be part or more of implementation? Is it a gap between lawmaking and implementation? Look, we need to have a sit-down as far as child laws and implementation.
The recent case that my colleague just asked, Ruth, painted a gloomy picture about the juvenile justice system in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And the question on the lips of many Nigerians is that when juveniles are arrested and profiled, does it mean that they do not seek any judicial advice from the Attorney General of the state or even the Federation before arraigning these juveniles in court?
Even at the point of arresting these juveniles, what the law says is that a special unit of the police should be the ones involved even in the arrest, the first point of contact. They are supposed to be specialized in how they handle juveniles. These are children, for crying out loud. Before you speak of asking the Attorney General's office for an advice on how to prosecute, you know, that first post of intact, it can do a lot of damage to the mind of the child. Psychological trauma. He may not even know at that point that what he's doing is wrong yet. So if an officer who has not been trained, he can only do what he knows how to do. So it's a structural problem.
It's a structural problem, yes, but we have the law, which is meant to be implemented. I take a quote now, what the law provides, that a child under 7 is not criminally responsible for any act or omission. And a child under the age of 12 is also not criminally responsible for an act or omission unless it is proved that at the time of doing the act or making the omission, he had the capacity to know that he ought not to do so, the act or make the omission. Now, a child of 12 and above is responsible for any crime committed just like adults. However, the trial procedures differs. Let's put a perspective, you know, and look at the cases that have been handled, looking at these age grades I have mentioned. Is that really in place? Because what is the essence of having a law when it's not really well implemented?
On paper, you have these laws. On paper, you have bus-style institutions. On paper, you have the age of criminal responsibility. But in reality, how is that determined? In reality, how is the law being implemented? It cannot implement itself in a void. The law speaks to nebulum without people who implement them. The people who implement them need to be trained to properly implement them. How do you determine if this child is 7, 12, or above? You can't just say it by looking at the face of the child.
They have birth certificates.
At the point of arrest, that may not be on their person.
But it takes a process.
It does.
If we're following the rule of law, it takes a process before you can trial someone for any crime.
That is true.
So that's enough time to find out what age that child is.
At the point of arrest, which is usually how all criminal administration works. At the point of arrest, depending on the nature of crime that the child is being suspected to have committed. Let's take, for instance, felony, arson, or treason. The arresting officer does not have the liberty of asking the child for his birth certificate at that juncture. He only has to apprehend and to stop further crime, if that is what was going on. It is when these people are taken to the police station or whatever detention facility that all these facts are supposed to be elicited from them. Contact is supposed to be made with their parents or guardians, and from their parents or guardians, then these facts come out. Then after those facts have been established, the next steps follow thereon. But the problem that arises in these scenarios is some of these officers do not have this training. They pick up these children in the course of committing an alleged crime, so to speak. They only do what they know how to do. They bundle them to their available facility. If the only facility they have on ground is a regular cell and nothing else, that is the only place they can keep them. If they have no access to finding out the ward or the guardian of this child, then they leave it at that. That is why I spoke to training here. It's like any other sector. Specialization makes all the difference. Somebody needs to be trained to act professionally.
So if I get you clear, you are not saying that Nigeria lack the resource, the human resource to deal with this issue.
It's not just
but the thing is that Nigeria, having adopted the United Nations Child Rights Convention in 1991, so expected that countries will go back and domicile this thing in their law book, in their statutes. Does it mean that we don't have people, understand, the Ministry of Justice or the justice sector generally, to articulate this issue and then find way of implementing them?
In my view, our problem has never been the laws. The laws have always been there, just like human rights. The laws are there. Our problem has always been a socio-economic one. Let's speak to realities here. Are the resources, are they available for those police officers to have been trained? Are they police officers who were trained particularly to handle issues of minors? Are they facilities only for the detention of juveniles? How many bus-style institutions do you have nationwide? Do you have statewide? How are these bus-style institutions maintained? Is it run for the purposes of rehabilitation of the juvenile or just to detain him or keep him? Some of these hard questions, they are realistic problems and they are not legislative. You can make all the laws you want. You can ratify all the UN treaties on it. But as long as those facilities are not there, they are not magicians.
One will ask, when the police steps in, make the arrest, which is what you say they're trained to do, make the arrest. Now, they get to the police stations where they are detained. You detain someone first before you take the person to court, before prison, before the legal process starts. Now, when the lawyer comes in or steps in to handle this matter, maybe that's where the lawyer is expected to make this rule of engagement with this juvenile clear to the police officers. So let's look at the aspect of the legal practitioners and how they're doing their own part, their own role effectively. Would you say they're doing their own part?
Look, we can't run away from this. The entire stakeholders in the criminal justice sector need to do better. From the police officers to the prosecuting officers, even to the law courts. But they can only do to the limit of the facilities on ground. Take for instance here, as at the point that that child was drafted, who interacted with the child? Who ascertained the nature of crime committed? Were there facilities available for notifying their wards, their guardians or parents? Were their interviews taken in a language that they understood? Were they availed the opportunity of interacting for purposes of establishing what even happened? Do they even know that what they participated in is a crime? All this speaks to the facilities. After that is done, they are supposed to have been charged to court within a particular period of time. Before they are charged to court, where are they kept? People scream to the high heavens that they detain them in regular police cells. Where else does the police presently have to keep them? How many borstal institutions do we have? Who runs those borstal institutions? How are they maintained? Now, we speak to the divide that comes from when they are arrested, when they are interviewed, then to where they are prosecuted. The course of prosecution takes them to court. Ordinarily, just like we have economic crimes, just like we have matrimonial crimes, just as we have admiralty or even family, specialized courts, specialized judges are supposed to be put in place to handle this matter. Look, it's a bottoms-up problem. At each level of what we presently have, we have a problem. At the point of arrest, we have a problem. At the point of detention, we have a problem. At the point of arraignment, we have a problem. Then at the point of prosecution, we have a problem. We can't wish these things away.
Okay, let me cut in here. Using the last case as a study, the arraignment of this juvenile before the Federal High Court. Now, having arraigned these children, does it mean that the judge handling that case did not look at the faces of these children? And then when he was invoking the issue of bail, I'm coming to say, the issue of bail, each child was given a bail of 10 million naira. You know, bail is discretionary. But how do you look at that?
The first question you should ask
law is law.
That was before the case was even struck out.
Yes.
We're just looking at the narratives around it.
What facts were presented to the court? Can you really tell, if I may be clear, the court works based on facts as presented to it. At that juncture, it's working based on the facts the prosecution presented and the facts the defense would have prevented, if any. The legal aid sector is supposed to provide free legal access, representation for those children.
Yes.
Were they available?
That's where their defense would have come in.
It is those facts or the lack of it to the court that puts the court in a position. When people say a court is misled, we are seeing a real-life example of it. If the prosecution drafts a charge, and in the charge it puts the age of that individual at 18, as far as the court is concerned, based on the evidence before him, he is dealing with an adult. He's not a scientist.
What he's saying is the faces. These are not children.
Look at my face. I dare you to guess my age.
Oh, no, you are an adult. So guessing your age as an adult, it's quite difficult. But for a child, it's different. A 7-year-old or a 12-year-old can look like a 7-year-old. But in this case where you said maybe the facts presented is that the age
the police provided to be
18, yes.
18.
So, but what if they are not 18?
If they are not 18, if it is established that they are not up to the age of criminal responsibility, there is a procedure set down in law that the court follows.
Now the question I want to believe he's asking is, did they verify those facts presented?
Face of the facts presented to the court. That is all the court can legally abide by. To do otherwise, you move into the era of speculation. Look, this is a court of record. He can only work with record. Yes, he may look at the face of a child or an individual and say, this person looks young, address me on this issue. This person does not look the age that you say on this paper. Address me on this issue. That may be so.
You made a salient point, Mr. Echo, about if these children, legal aid was supposed to step in. What would you say stopped legal aid from stepping in defending these children?
That's $1 million question. We have lapses in our criminal justice sector. We have lapses. We can't run away from that. That's why I spoke to facilities. Right from the point of the apprehension and at the police station, the legal aid sector ought to have been contacted. They should have played a role. Perhaps if they had done that, that case may not have made it to trial. But that didn't happen here, at least speaking from the facts available to me. That didn't happen.
Okay, we know that part of some of the reasons giving rise to this juvenile indulging in crime and criminality as a result of poverty and so many other factors. although I know it's difficult to deal with by a lawyer. But what do you think, what do you prefer, understand, to addressing it? Because as we are speaking now,
what's happening?
Crime, and these are the category of people that are indulging in crime these days. What do we need to do beyond establishing these booster homes, understand, by our leaders, political leaders?
It's a socio-economic problem. Look, it's a problem that you need to fix bottom up. The orientation is wrong. The religious institutions need to play a bigger role. The family units need to come into play. Somebody needs to tell them, you can do this, you can't do this. To do this is wrong, to do this is right. Somebody needs to tell a child, avoid a riot, or when you sense there's a breakdown of law and order. It is wrong to take what does not belong to you.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to tell them that corruption should not be glorified. It's an orientation thing. It can only happen in the homes, in the religious institutions, in a place like Nigeria. It's a socio-economic problem. It cannot be wished away by many laws. We can have all the laws we like. But till we pull our socks up, till the family units start taking responsibility of their children, till the churches and the mosques and whatever traditional and religious belief we have, till they start playing the role they used to play back in the day, till proper guidance is meted out to these children, they may not know better. Everything we are speaking to is the symptoms. Where is the National Orientation Agency in this? Is this not a reflection of lack of proper orientation? Is this not a facet of decline in the family structure? Most of these things are things that has to be done behind the scenes.
Okay, so you've mentioned society, you've mentioned orientation, you've mentioned family. Where's the place of the legal, the judiciary? They also have a role to play. They have a stake in this because they say the last hope of the common man is the judiciary. That's it. Now, how can we begin to propel a child-friendly legal system that puts into consideration the security, the mental well-being, and the emotional intelligence of children when passing trial?
Well, at the point the judiciary is getting involved, you already have a problem.
Why do you say that?
Before the judiciary gets involved, the crime has been committed. The minor has been picked up. He has gone through the rigors of a police detention or interrogation.
So his
psyche has already been affected.
Yes.
We should be looking towards keeping the judiciary from even interfacing with them if we do things right. As at the point they are going before a judge, it's self-evidencing that we already have a problem. Yes, true to what you said, the judiciary needs to play a better role in development of a more friendly, child-oriented court system.
Yeah.
They need to do a better role in the orientation and the training of their support staff, the justices, and everybody involved in the trial of these minors. But let's not forget that's at the point that the judiciary is coming in, we already have a problem.
Okay, for decades now, we'll be having congestion of prison or correctional centers. Do we attribute these juveniles that they dump in custodial centers as part of the problem? Why we have prison centers congested? Because so many presidential committees have been set up to decongest the prison. They will congest this year. Let's say you go back, you find other outrageous number of inmates again. Do you attribute this to part of the problem?
Well,
because earlier you mentioned that where is the juvenile correctional centers? We don't even have it. So
the congestion of our detention system, it's a thesis on its own. It's a full-time problem. It's not just to decongest the prison. It's to stop the flow of unnecessary detention. Who puts these people in there?
the court
the
tries
policemen.
them.
Not all the time.
Okay.
If you look, those in the criminal justice sector system, especially the Nigerian police and the security agencies, they need better training. They need to realize as at what points of interaction that these people can be given administrative bails, held in bonds, whatever step that needs to be taken without them having to be detained in the regular prisons. But when that is not done, when they have met their constitutional limit for which they can keep these people, the only place that they can put them is the prisons. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. Legally, they can't keep them more than 48 hours. Or is it 24? So if that happens, they have to arraign them. They go to arraign them in a system that is already overworked. They don't go back to the police station from there. Up and until the trial commences properly, they have to be detained somewhere. Look, to decongest our prisons, I think we should move beyond just wishing all these things. It's not by the number of committees. We have to be proactive. All the stakeholders in the justice sector system must sit down and say this is a demon in the room that must be excised. If not, we are just going around in circles.
What do we make out of the intervention of Mr. President in all this? What do we make out of it? And what does it spell, understand, for the judiciary and those in the criminal justice system?
Well, first and foremost, he was a very noble justice by Mr. President. It shows that he has the welfare and a humane side to leadership. He has heard the cries of his people, and he took a step immediately without going through any procedural or bureaucratic process.
Yeah.
For that is commendable. But let's not forget that the problem, like the elephant in the room, is still there. It's still there. How do we prevent future occurrences? That should be our focus.
Yes.
And that is why I said there are no facilities. Look, a man with a baton, as a police or security officer, can only use a baton to confront any crime. Do you expect a man with a baton to stop a bandit with a gun? He cannot. And so on and so forth. It flows right from the agencies all the way to the courts.
You know, it's unfortunate, Mr. Echo, that we have to deal with a system like this. I don't want to use a negative word to quantify it. But again, the advocacy must be sustained, because this is not an issue that is new to Nigeria. Like Austin said earlier, as we're talking, more crimes are happening, even by juvenile. And I'm sure on your plate you have cases that has to do with juvenile, if I'm correct. But let's hold the conversation and take a break. We'll be back shortly. Please stay tuned.
What are we doing as a nation to, first of all, settle our teeming populace, especially the
NTA's political package with a third eye on the nation's political scene. I am Fisa Ogunfuyi. Welcome.
You have to be very careful giving space to people who are obviously sponsored to further the agenda of some other groups.
We have a lot of questions. A lot of questions in a closed door sessions. Some of these issues, some of the problems bedeviling of their.
In fact, between June 1st and July 17, 19-point-something billion has left the coffers of the NDDC.
I can say my constituency, they need everything, because we don't have anything.
A method for digital literacy is a bot that you can use, you can interact to learn more about digital literacy.
Hello, it's our pleasure to have you join us on platform. I'm Ruth Aguwele.
What is the yardstick for measuring everybody's moral integrity? It's critical at this point in time.
How daunting has that been for the Institute in getting them abreast with all the legislative procedures?
The fact remains that one training workshop is not enough.
Thank you for staying tuned. The conversation is dealing with juvenile cases. Mr. Echo, before we took that break, we're just examining how the system, based on what you've shared with us, is eroding. And it's quite unfortunate. But let's also look at the mind of this juvenile. I stumbled on a video recently of a 13-year-old that, poisoned her dad. And when she was arrested, before the community, and she was not remorse. She was confident that she committed a crime, killing her father. In a case like that, what would you say would have gone through the mind of that little girl? She's just 13. Psychologically, for me, looking at that, I could only just have mental picture, but I wouldn't know. What kind of punishment? How do you deal with such case?
Sometimes particular offenses have to be met with a big stick. The law already delineates what kind of offenses and what punishment is available or amenable to same. If you commit a nature and a type of offense, you can only go away with the punishment for it. And your age may not really be a defense for some of these offenses. Look, in criminal justice, the intention of the person, which we call mens rea, plays a very big role. To ascertain what was the mens rea or the mind of the person that committed that offense is usually the determinant of guilt or otherwise. The actus reus is just the active part. The laws are there. The challenge we are having is that the system is overburdened. Every day, Nigeria's population increases. Is the system being increased to meet up with the exploding population? Some of our facilities have been here for over 40 years. Some even longer. I heard somewhere that one of our detention facilities were built in the colonial era. How do you expect that particular facility to handle modern age problem that came in after it was established? A structure can only carry the weight it has the capacity to. Rather than, flog the system for failure, we should enhance it.
Exactly.
We should take it back to the, chop it up, reverse engineer it, know exactly where the problems are. Where do we need to do better? Is it by creating of more hostile institutions? Is it by more aggressive advocacy? Is it by orientation? These things must be done. What is the status of the education of these children? There's a lot the education does to a mind. Yeah. A learned mind will not do some things because you know better. But that knowing better, people take it for granted.
Well, there were questions of, the aspect of what the father would have done to her for her to get to that point of taking his life with poison. That means it was carefully orchestrated. What kind of punishment is the question? Will she face the full wrath of the law, even as a juvenile?
Well, that is for the trial to determine. I'm sure she has been arrested.
Yes.
I'm sure she's been processed. I'm sure she will be arraigned. And if that is happening, we are moving closer to the realm of sub judice.
Okay, I think I read some legal literature like that. In other crimes, those who leverage the United Nations Child Rights Act, they establish the need for family courts to be established. And these family courts make recruitment of social workers. Now, in all this we have been discussing, you hear about the police, you hear about the judges, you hear about that, but you hardly hear about the social workers. Do we have them to deal with the issue of juvenile cases in Nigeria?
At least for the FCT, I can confirm they have a welfare unit. I have interfaced with one in the course of litigation. The judge in that matter handed over, I will not use the word accused, the defendant to us at the end of the trial. And the FCT welfare units took over from there, exemplary. The cost of repatriation of that person back to his locality, his welfare in the interim, they handled it. As So we commend them. You urge other states who don't have such robust and effective systems to pick up the mantle. These workers should, they need to integrate with the criminal justice system completely. From the point of arrest, that is the police station, to the point of arraignment, that is the court, to the point of detention, if it is a detention-oriented punishment. If it is one that you do not need to be detained, how is the person being reoriented? How is the person being trained to become a better human being? What exactly was the problem? Did it start at home? What is the situation at home? That is where the welfare plays a role. They will interfere with this child. They will interview the child. They will call the parents, the guardians, whoever is responsible for this child to find out what is lacking. Perhaps you are not feeding this child properly at home. And this child committed an act of necessity because he or she was hungry. You see, these things that I say, it's elementary. Yeah. It's out there in our faces. But then again, it cannot be implemented without the facilities. Some of these children don't even know that what they are doing is wrong.
Yes.
That is why I say it's an orientation thing. Look, we as parents, as brothers, as sisters, as mothers, whatever role we play in the community, there's a saying that it takes a community to raise a child.
Yes.
It seems our community no longer raises children. We are more interested in punishing them. We should look at ourselves once in a while, look in the mirror and say, am I doing enough? We are not. We focus on only what is ours. This one is my child, so he should be looked after. That one is not my child. So.
You know, it's unfortunate, the whole value system eroding in society. But again, some psychologists are of the opinion that when you take this juvenile and you mix them up with adults in a prison, what you're doing to their psyche is something you don't want to imagine. We've seen cases of these children leave, after serving their punishment, go back to even do worse.
Worse. Because they are hardened.
They're hardened. They've associated themselves with...
Sort of they are sexually molested.
Yes.
And they are not all manner of things.
Do you share the same perspective, Mr. Eko?
Yeah, that is it's a universal truth. Even as an adult, if you mingle long enough with the wrong company, you might become as bad as the company. Birds of the same feather, they say. They usually flock together.
Yeah.
Misery will love company. You take someone, you mix him with a hardened criminal. You mix him with a sexual molester. You mix him with somebody who has a bias for arson. It is only normal that some of it will rub off. Back to the same problem. Facility, facility, facility.
But Mr. Eko, are we going to keep talking facility? Is there no temporary solution? Because if we want to wait until we get the right infrastructure to implement some of this legal, effective legal system that will be friendly to children, are we going to stall justice for what a child deserves in the aspect of looking after that child's mental being or well-being before we get to that point of let's have the right infrastructure? Are there no temporary measures?
Well, first and foremost, you must first admit you have a problem. When you admit you have a problem, then you look for the solutions.
We've been admitting this problem a lot.
All the stakeholders must be called on the table. This is our reality. How do we deal with this? We cannot keep putting these children through the meat grinder, as it were. What do we need to do better? What do the law enforcement agencies, on your part, what aspects do you need to do better in? On the court system, what aspects do you need to do better in? On the social welfare, how can you become more present? It has to be a mix. All the stakeholders must come on board, and they must come on with a common plan, an agreed plan, for them to be a solution in the interim. Because if you speak independently to the law enforcement agencies than to the courts, you have a disconnect.
It's a chain.
If you speak independently to the courts without taking into consideration the welfare officers, you have a problem.
Yeah.
If you speak independently to those three without the detention people, you have a problem. All the stakeholders must sit they should realize their house is on fire. And they should come up with how it can be doused quickly, if I may add.
The booster homes we're talking about, what are they supposed to do? Their mandate, really?
It is supposed to be the only kind of facility that a minor or a juvenile should be detained in. There he's supposed to be, the focus is on reorientation, training, letting him realize how he can become a better member of the society.
That is counseling.
Counseling is just an integral part of it.
Okay.
He needs to change his entire paradigm. Education, training,
Skill acquisition.
skill acquisition, all that is what it's supposed to do. The focus of the Boston institution, it is not supposed to be a penal-oriented center, but something to make you a better member of the society. You are a child, the
How
society
many do
knows
we
that.
have in Nigeria?
Oh,
It's a question, Mr. Echo.
I reacted the way I did because the last time I did try to check, which was years back,
About 6 or so.
well, in my state, I could only find 1 or 2 then. The functional one.
There's one in Kaduna.
And even that one, the state it was then, was nothing to write home about.
Whose responsibility is it to ensure that we have this
Booster home.
institute?
It's the state.
So the state governments have a role to play in this.
They must. Understand that crime is usually committed at the most basic levels. Those closer to the grassroots must be called in to have their say. Those nearest, closest, that interact most frequently with those minors must be called in. They must have their say. They must be told to pull up their socks. Whatever they need to do better, they should start doing it better. We look at this maybe from a historic perspective. It has not happened to me, so it's not my problem. No, it's our problem.
Yeah, it is.
We mingle in the same society with these people.
Yeah. And they mingle with your children. If you said it has not happened to your child, they mingle with your children.
Yes, of course.
Yes. And the collateral effects of it, you can't run away from it. It's a ripple effect. We should take ownership of this problem and do better to resolution of it, and coming up with an implementation strategy that takes it away at the root so that we don't keep dealing with the symptoms like we saw in this particular incident. Let's deal with the sickness itself. That should be the theme. That should be the focus. That, in my view, will provide a better, long-lasting solution to the crisis at hand.
The trend in conflict resolution now globally is shifting from court litigation, going to court to go and prosecute your cases and others. People are now advocating alternative dispute resolution. Now, this ADR, does it have a place in dealing with this issue of juvenile we are talking about? Bearing in mind the place of our traditional institution, where the called members of the community who indulge in crimes and other things sit round table and then iron out things. Do you have ADR having anything to do with this?
Of course. It can be integrated. Even in the AJA, you have some sort of.
Yeah.
That's when you talk of plea again. Don't waste my utilities. Let's come to a compromise. Let's not go to full trial. The same thing can be broken down to attend to juveniles. You painted a wonderful picture of the traditional society. That's why I say this is a community problem. Back in the day, you commit an offense, your first point of punishment is your own parents. You are first taken to your home. After that day, usually you know not to do it again. That is my view. That has always been my view. We need to take ownership of this crisis. Simple as that.
But, you know, it's good you narrow it down to community level because most of these crimes, it's even more in the rural areas than in the urban centers. It's just the urban centers, the law, or rather security agencies are swift to action and all of that. But in rural communities, how much security is even provided at that level. So there's not even data of the kind of crimes happening there in the real aspect, looking at the juvenile situation. Would you say, I like the recommendation you brought up of a stakeholders, a holistic approach, a multi-sectorial kind of forum that could be looked into some of these issues. But again, before we get to that point where all sections will wake up and say, okay, this is what we must do, at the community level, the role of this district head or community leaders, religious leaders, where do they come in? Let's start to build that value system. You made a strong point of, let's prevent this crime before we even get to trying these offenders.
That you have just spoken what I think hits the nail on the head, so to speak. Now, this person interacts first in the community before he goes out to the larger society. He attends a church, he attends a mosque, he interacts with members of his direct family, extended family, governed by family head, village head, district head, so on and so forth. The orientation must change. Glorification of corruption must end. It's a value system that seems to reward not honesty, but accomplishment must be redirected. All of these factors that mold the mind of any member of the society, culturally, ethically, and morally, they should put in more effort. This is more or less an instance of their failure than any other thing. Before you find a child committing an offense, something has gone wrong somewhere.
Yes.
And it went wrong at the most basic of levels. Who are those around at that basic level? It's these people that I have mentioned. If he attends a mosque, somebody around the mosque, somebody around the church, somebody around the family, somebody around the streets saw him and did nothing. A simple rebuke can change a lot. A simple act of kindness can even change the course of events. Are we doing enough as members of the society?
Okay, let me come here. We have spoken so much about the protection of the juveniles in criminal justice trial generally. But there's something I want to say. It is said that there's no smoke without fire. These juveniles that are coming to the streets, taken to the streets to cause mayhem, destroy properties and all this and so and so, they have been sponsored, allegedly, let me use the word, allegedly sponsored by some people. So if we are now trying to exonerate these juveniles, what becomes of the sponsor? Don't you think that those in the justice sector must do something to get this perpetrator, to book?
If it is true that those juveniles did in fact commit the crimes they were alleged to have committed, that needs to be established. What was the motive for committing this fact if in reality they committed them also needs to be established. What were their motivation? Who sponsored them, if any, then comes into play. Then those sponsors should be gone after and brought to account if it is true.
So those flags they were displaying during that end bad governance, certainly they are not the people that manufacture those flags. People must have brought their money, together to provide those flags.
You know, the difficulty I find myself here, I must first speak as a lawyer before as a member of this esteemed panel. As a lawyer, I know your allegation, no matter how wonderful, until it is proven, it's still conjecture.
So, Mr. Echo, we're about to round off. I just want to hear your final thoughts. It's just unfortunate that, young people who we see as our future leaders, dreams are dying. So, what's your message to society? Because it's a collective responsibility.
It takes a community to raise a child. We should learn to look at our neighbors' children as our own children. We should learn to look at the child on the street in the same way, with the same value we place on our own children. We should learn to treat these young people better. We should learn to educate them. We should learn to take them off the streets. We should try to provide basic amenities for them. It's not everything you must wait for the government to come and do. A little bit here, a little bit there can save a flood.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Echo,
Thank you for
HMB Echo. He's a legal practitioner, SAN to be precise. Thank you very much for your
Thank you so
insight.
much.
We'll continue the advocacy because this is one issue that is very crucial to society. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Austin Ayembe, our judiciary correspondent, thank you so much for your insight on platform.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
All right, we've been discussing ways of dealing with juvenile cases. What more can I say? You have a role to play just like I do. Let's look out for our future generations. Let's do the needful and let our conscience prick us at every time we see something wrong.